Hello, hello. Welcome to Not Alone. I am Valeria Lipovetsky, and I am so excited for you to hear today's episode. I'm sitting down with Dr. Lisa Miller, whom I heard speak on a few different podcasts, and because of that, I picked up her book, The Awakened Brain. And let me tell you, Lisa Miller is a professor, researcher, and clinical psychologist. But you don't often find people with these kind of accolades speak on spirituality like she does. And I think that's what made me so intrigued by her work and also craved to sit down and talk to her. I'm honored that she was able to come in person, and she brought forward so much fascinating data and research, which I assumed it will come, especially because I read the book, and the amount of notes and highlights I've had through it is actually mind-blowing. But it's not the research that she brought. It was the humanity and, most importantly, her heart. It felt like a completely different experience to sit down with an expert like her to talk about spirituality, the way she speaks to it. She really feels what she preaches. I'm so excited for you to listen to this conversation because it left me feeling inspired and so touched. And I know you will too feel the same and leave with some lessons and a few thought starters for sure. Dr. Lisa Miller. Okay, Dr. Lisa Miller, thank you so much for being here.
I'm so excited to talk with you. I just love your spirit. I love your spiritual sparkle and heart. And I think what you do is bring an authentic voice for men and women, but really women everywhere, to body, mind, and soul, radiantly beautiful and powerful soul.
Thank you so much. I want to just do a quick little intro to the audience in case they don't know you. You are a clinical psychologist. Mm-hmm. You are the founder of the Spirituality MINDBODY Institute and best-selling author of one of my favorite books for the year, The Awakened Brain, which you see, I really dug into it, but also The Spiritual Child, which you just gifted to me, and I'm so excited to read. But today, I really want to immerse ourselves in a conversation about the awakened brain. Mm-hmm. I got so many insights and clarity around so many different terms. So I even want to start there. Can you give me the definition of what is an awakened brain?
I'm so glad we start there. Every one of us is born with a natural ability to have a deep spiritual connection. We're born with this. It's in our genes. We know this through the lens of science. Mm-hmm. And the way that any deep human capacity lands in us is that there is a circuit in the brain. And indeed, we have a circuit in our brain for spiritual awareness. And even more, we have a circuit in our brain to be in relationship to God. My word is God. Mm-hmm. Some people might use the word Jesus or Hashem or the universe reaching out to us, but we are built to be in a sustained, transcendent, sacred relationship. So using, for the moment, my word, God is present every moment, whether or not I pay attention. God walks with us every moment, whether or not we join in a conversation. But we have in our brain the capacity to awaken and be in a sustained relationship with God. We all have it. Mm-hmm. And there's no matter what I do, I could make terrible mistakes. I could live in a way that I'm embarrassed about, and still I can turn the corner, and at every moment, God will walk with us. What does that mean? It means that we are built with circuits in the brain to know that we're loved and held. Loved and held, just as we were loved and held maybe in our parents' or grandparents' arms. We are literally loved and held and built to see it. It is the bonding network in our brain. We are built to not just have to make tough choices alone. I lost my job. What do I do next? My marriage fell apart. What will I do next? No. God guides us. So we're not just loved and held. We're guided in tough times, synchronicities, dreams, mystical experiences. We're built to perceive God's guidance. Loved and held, guided. We are never alone. That's our awakened brain, but we need to choose to awaken and use it.
When I started this book, I was so curious on understanding how did you even decide to go down the spirituality route, in kind of science. I feel like when you started this research, spirituality wasn't really a thing, in the science, in the psychology. There were all these other things that were examined and proven, but I'm sure that spirituality was kind of a road for you a long road to get through in order to bring it together with the whole world of mental health.
Mental health, as you say, was completely silent. Mental health had nothing to say about spirituality for decades. And yet the patients in the most painful moments, just excruciating moments, were asking for spiritual support. I would be in my office on an inpatient unit where people are having the worst month of their entire life. The pain is overwhelming, so much so that they're afraid they'll take their own life if they don't take a break. So there on the inpatient unit, patients were knocking at the door saying, knock, knock, Dr. Miller, will you come with me? And come with me meant step out of the treatment office, down the hall, into the kitchen, into the back pantry. And there with pots and pans hanging over my head, the patients would say, hey, Dr. Miller, will you pray with me? It was a relationship to God they were seeking in their most painful moments. Yes, they need treatment, but treatment alone without a relationship to God, your higher power, whatever your word is, treatment alone is not enough. We are naturally spiritual beings, and the way through real pain and to find new direction is by turning to our higher power, to saying, God, what do you ask of me now? How can I find you in this total loneliness? I'm feeling so cut off. I'm feeling like such a loser. I feel like I didn't get what I want. My life isn't what I want. Handing it over to God. Now, most of our faith traditions say we are built to walk with God and treat one another as children of God. And yet in our public square, there's no discussion. And when people do, it's a tiny little whisper as if they're talking about something naughty, just like when I had to stand in the pots and pans closet to speak with a woman who was suicidal in order to pray. That's a real arrow in the heart. That's a real neglect of our soul. And how do we take it back? We simply do it. I mean, in the very same way that you've taken back a space for women to be free and expressive and intelligent, body, mind, and soul, we can use our spiritual voice and take it back. Just do it today, now.
I'm so excited to talk about today's sponsor, Branch Basics. As a mom of 3, I know I made a huge change in my household products when my kids started walking and touching everything. I now more than ever aware that whatever is in the house affects our health. So when I went out there and tried to find a clean substitution for cleaning supplies, it wasn't easy, I'm not gonna lie, but then I found Branch Basics. They are a non-toxic cleaning product company that are on a mission to help people create a healthy home. It's absolutely amazing what the product can do. They're fragrance-free, all-in-one concentrate. When diluted with different amounts of water, it can replace every toxic laundry or cleaning product in the home. The products are all non-toxic, hypoallergenic, baby and pet safe, as well as free of fragrance, hormone disruptors, and harmful preservatives. Their premium starter kit will help you replace all of your toxic cleaning products in your home. It is a no-brainer. Save 15% on your starter kit or hand soap when you use code NOTALONE at www.branchbasics.com. Again, that is code NOTALONE for 15% off when you purchase a starter kit or hand soap. Did you have an experience or a study that you read or research that you saw is happening that really made it clear for you that this is your path, that spirituality is something you will be will be your life's work?
Well, there was a moment when I was just starting out. I've been in the science and practice of spirituality in mental health for 25 years. And when I was first starting out, there was a moment on an inpatient unit where people were suffering tremendously, where the time of year was the time of year of Yom Kippur. And at Yom Kippur, normally, Jewish people, it's the most important day of the year. It's a time of forgiveness. It's a time of fixing things with one another, fellow human beings, before we then turn to God for forgiveness. And there was no service. There was no Yom Kippur service at all on the inpatient unit, despite a number of Jewish patients. So I invited those Jewish patients who'd like to, I'm not a rabbi, but I could facilitate a Yom Kippur service. And sure enough, I showed up and everyone had ditched their hospital gurneys, which are very embarrassing, and had put on beautiful clothes. They'd called home and they were dressed beautifully. And they sat at the table in the kitchen. There was no sanctuary of this inpatient unit, knowing it was a special day. There was almost a sanctified space when I walked in the room. And as I sat down and people started to pray, the woman who had been debilitated by shame and guilt suddenly sat up and said, I always knew we could be forgiven, but sitting here at Yom Kippur in the presence of you all and praying, I know I can be forgiven. The patient, the fellow who was very chaotic and screaming, he hit his cadence, he hit his stride, and he started leading us in the service. There was a complete transformation when we came together to pray to God in a way that people knew so deeply in their heart they'd known since childhood. There was an awakening of the spiritual heart. And I thought, what? Mental health without spiritual awakening is actually disintegrating of our deepest resource. It is silencing the wellspring. It is plugging the wellspring. I'm going to spend the rest of my life looking at this through the lens of science so that we can understand it more deeply, and using the language of science, the only language mental health understands, we can change the field. And we have. It's happening.
That was my next question. Do you see the progress and the evolution of all these findings happening in real time?
We do. The findings are staggering. So a strong spiritual core, awakening our natural spiritual awareness, is associated with an 80% decrease in our likelihood for addiction. Strengthening the spiritual core is associated with a decrease in the rate of suicide. Our national epidemic for young people is not cancer or COVID. It is sadly suicide. High school students more likely to die of suicide than an auto accident as the number one killer. So we have an epidemic, and it should be on the front page every day of the Miami Herald and the New York Times. It should be everywhere, but it's silent. There's just not enough prevention, because what the science shows is that when spiritual life is shared, there's an 82% decreased relative risk of completed suicide, which means if I could give every high school student a pill that was 4/5 protective against the epidemic, who wouldn't, right? We need to awaken as a society, and we need to support young adults in awakening their spiritual core. As a parent, it's the most important thing we do.
Yeah, it's interesting to see how much spirituality became a norm and a quest for a lot of young people. It kind of was born from the inside out. It wasn't like what the society prescribed. I started seeing it more and more with young people. They're craving it on their own. So it's like this inner intelligence that they're allowing, to get through. Because now the way even younger people speak is different. It's more, they're breaking kind of the boundaries of mental health and the boundaries of what they were taught to think. Do you see that, or is it just me? Because I'm very active on social media, so I'm kind of interacting with this every single day.
Valeria, you've given voice to what is the emerging generation. Gen Z is a profoundly spiritual generation. There is, in the walk of Gen Z, a notion that everyone counts, everyone's respected. There is, in the crowdsourcing, a notion that we are one, a unit of awareness. There's a spiritual, natural walk in Gen Z. Now, the pain that Gen Z faces, why is it that half of Gen Z is suffering with addiction or depression or something, is because of the outdated ideas that have been laid on Gen Z by other generations. For instance, the idea that this splintered identity that, I'm a woman, not a man, and I'm this race, not that, and I'm gay or straight, or, and if we carve ourselves up into tiny little pieces, pretty soon there's not very many people with whom we have much in common. And what actually Gen Z is doing in their walk is saying we are one.
It's so refreshing to hear And to have a conversation like that about Gen Z, because I feel like we spend so much time criticizing all that's wrong with the generation, because there is a lot going on for them in terms of, and them, I'm a millennial, so I feel like I'm part of it, but not quite. But even watching my kids, I mean, they are dealing with so much more information, more messages, more everything. And it's refreshing to kind of see the positive impact that generation will have on the next generations to come. This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. Give online therapy a try at betterhelp.com/notalone and get on your way to being your best self. This year has gone by so quickly. What's something you're proud of in 2024 so far? What's something you still want to accomplish this year? When life goes so fast, it's important to take a moment to celebrate your wins and make adjustments for the rest of the year. Therapy can help you take stock of your progress and set achievable goals for the next 6 months. The idea behind Not Alone is about sharing the relatable issues we all experience but don't feel comfortable talking about. You can take it a step further with BetterHelp. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. All you need to do is fill out a brief questionnaire and get matched with a licensed therapist. You can switch therapists at any time for no additional charge, which is a huge benefit compared to the in-person sessions. When it comes to starting therapy, people often feel quite apprehensive, and I get that. But that being said, just because something is unfamiliar or uncomfortable, it doesn't mean that it should be dismissed. A lot of the times I take that unfamiliar feeling as a sign that I need to explore something more. Take a moment. Visit betterhelp.com/notalone today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/notalone. That scares me a little bit though.
Why?
That because I truly believe that there's always the swings of extreme before we kind of get to the middle.
Yeah.
And I do find signs of extreme on the other side with Gen Z, just naturally, because they're pushing the boundaries on what's been taught and what's been presented. So they're really going aggressively to the other direction. But there's definitely going to come, that's at least my kind of prediction and hope, there's going to come a bit of a middle ground. It's a conscious awakening, because with awakening also in general, to me, spirituality is an industry now, right? Like we're selling spirituality. You see it in so many different things. And the marketing machine is a big machine, a healthy machine, and they're catching up on that. So I feel like, sometimes the way it's sold and the way it's consumed is not the real deal.
So we have inborn in us an instrument for knowing what is authentic awakening. We are born, all of us, with an innate awakened brain. So there is built into us, if you will, please excuse the expression, a bullshit meter. And we know when something is schlock, and we know when something is being sold to us. But what needs to happen is that we all authorize our inner spiritual heart. The guru is within.
Oh, I love that. I think that's the biggest message I want to continue pushing, that the guru is within us.
We are born innately with the capacity to know what's true. The guru is within. The spiritual teacher is within. And a good outward teacher doesn't say, hey, follow me. Doesn't say, ooh, for just a little bit more money, you can step 3 feet closer to me and come to my special seminar. A true guru invites us to listen to our deep inner heart. A true guru says, the teacher is within, validates our inner knowing, and steps back and says, only you can hear the voice of God, the universe inside of you.
That's beautiful. There was, when I was reading the book, I was so surprised to hear this finding. A child was 5 times less likely to be depressed when spiritual life was shared with a mother. While maternal depression doubled the risk for depression in the child, which is on its own, I just wasn't aware that happens, the fivefold protective benefit of spirituality meant that spirituality matters twice as much to our mental health as maternal mental health.
The most important thing we do as mothers is to strengthen the spiritual core of our child. There's nothing else we can give them. No amount of education, no amount of money. There's nothing we can give our children as important as a strong spiritual heart. And how do they get that? Well, even though we are all born naturally spiritual beings, when we look through the lens of science, a twin study, we see that 1/3 of our spiritual capacity is inborn, but 2/3 is cultivated. And where is it cultivated? Foremost by our parents. And while parents, fathers, mothers, grandparents all matter, it turns out that the mother is really the torchbearer of spiritual life. When we pass the torch to our children, they can see the way. It is lit and they can see the way.
How do you lead children in spirituality?
As a mother, the most important thing I can do is build the spiritual core of my child. How do I do that? Well, it turns out that it's not by handing them a book at 20. The worst thing that we can do as parents is say, oh, I don't want to make my child just like me. You know, I'm Jewish, my husband's Catholic. We just won't talk about it. That's the worst thing we can do. The best thing we can do is lovingly and authentically, each of us in our own spiritual voice, walk the walk and talk the walk of spiritual life. What does that mean? It means live out our spiritual values. If you see the homeless guy, if you see the kid who's being bullied at school, if you see the family that hasn't been quite brought into the new classroom yet, reach out, walk the walk of spiritual values, and then narrate, talk the walk. You see that man on the street, he's God's child as much as us. Do you know why we're inviting this new family? Because when we come together, there's a sense of community that's not just any community, it's a sacred community. There's a sense of narrating as mothers how we see the world at the spiritual level. And the most important part is that whatever our tradition may be, we pray out loud. We meditate side by side. We invite our children into our own direct connection to our higher power.
It's interesting because you mentioned earlier how there is this idea of, you know, I'm this and my partner is this, and we don't want to impose it on the children. So we want to let them figure out which direction they want to go. But what I hear you say is that we want to expose them to the elements of our spirituality. They may redefine it for themselves later on, but it's that exposure to the practices and to the core of what it means to us and how we practice it.
The child is highly impacted by parent spiritual and religious life. They are in a developmental window. There's an openness and a curiosity and a natural spiritual awareness in the child. And when we as parents, 2/3 environmentally formed, give the child a language, any faith tradition, or even if we're spiritual but not religious, a way to connect to the higher power, to the sacred, to who I call God, it is there the rest of the child's life. But that developmental window, that openness, is not there if we wait until they're 25 or 30. The child is open. We wouldn't wait to introduce carrots and spinach until someone was 25. We wouldn't wait to teach physical activity. We wouldn't say, I'm going to let you pick your sport when you're 25. So we're not going to teach you tennis and we're not going to teach you swimming and we're going to wait till you're 25. It's much harder to pick up at 25. The child is highly formative and open, and it is primarily in childhood that we can shape natural spiritual awareness and say, here's a roadmap, here's a language to talk about our higher power. Here's a way of prayer or meditation that you can feel in your heart connected to God. The child's ready and hungry for this. Children will often come home and say, hey, I was at my friend's house and they prayed at dinner. They sang in the choir. They went to their services as a family. Can we do that? Children love it. But if we wait until they're grown up, there can be, the doors never fully close, but it can close about 80, 90%. They can't choose when they're older. I've spoken to so many people in their 20s and 30s, and they say, I love all this data about spirituality. I'd love to be spiritual. but I just don't feel it. The door has closed, not all the way, but 80-90%. Parents now, when they're young, pray out loud, talk about your spiritual experiences. If you've had in your own lifetimes of struggle, tell that story. I've told my children, when I was 19, my kids are now in college, I went through a really tough time. I really started to wonder, does God exist? And does life have any meaning? And it was excruciating. I mean, if we really take seriously not knowing if the world has any meaning, that's excruciating. And there was nothing in college that addressed it. There was no philosophy class, no theology class. There was nothing that I learned in school that opened my spiritual heart. It was my parents. It was people who I met in the road of life. So, to your point, Valeria, in parenthood, we teach so many things, but the most important thing we have to share is our own spiritual heart, our own awakened awareness.
I grew up in Israel, so we weren't necessarily practicing religion, but it was just everywhere around, right? So we didn't really have to work too hard because the whole country celebrating the same holidays has the same traditions. So it was very effortless kind of spirituality and religion. When I moved out of Israel, I didn't have that understanding that now I need to make an effort to keep that going. My husband grew up in North America. So we have the stories, of course, that we share of, great grandparents in Holocaust and, different kind of history and heritage kind of lessons. But we're not actively merging the spirituality and a religion together. And our middle son, he's very insightful. He came home last week and he said something like, you know what? We stopped doing Shabbat dinners. I've noticed that we don't do them anymore as we used to. And I said, you're right. We should start doing it again. And he started being very vocal lately about like, hey, you stopped doing that. And we stopped doing the candles. And we haven't been to a synagogue here. And just, like intuitively on his own, bringing it forward. And last week I went to my husband and said, listen, we have to step up. Like they're asking for it. It's no longer just, us trying to kind of, get through it. It's the children showing up, being like, show us.
How old is he?
Us.
How old is your
son? He's 9.
Beautiful. The naturally spiritual child. So to your point, Valeria, every child is born a naturally spiritual child. And if we really listen, as you're so beautifully doing with your open heart as a mother, we hear them hungry for spiritual guidance, spiritual community, to practice as a family, to feel it's not any dinner, it's Shabbat dinner, and it's sacred, and there's a ceremony, and we honor and feel God's presence. The child loves the feeling of God, that warm, bright, sparkly, numinous feeling of God. The child loves that. And what we can invoke that deliberately, we can have a prayer as a family, the people I love most on earth, my mother and father and siblings together, we can invoke God's presence. How wonderful that in your family, you do have a way in. You do have a sacred tradition and you know how to do it.
The connection is obvious, but spirituality and religion, do they exist separately? I know they can coexist, obviously, but is there a situation where there's religion, but the spirituality aspect is lost?
Well, so every one of us, like your son, is born a naturally spiritual being. It is innate. We know that through clinical science. We're naturally spiritual beings. Religion is a gift. It's a gift of our parents and grandparents. It's a gift of our culture and community. So a religion is 100% environmentally transmitted. For 2/3 of people in the United States, they say I am spiritual and I am religious. It's through my faith tradition that I pray to God, Hashem, Allah, Jesus. I invoke God's presence. I know my community, the sacred prayers. About 1/3 of people will say I'm spiritual, but I am not religious. So spirituality and religion, as you say, go hand in hand for about 2/3 of people in the United States. But there are plenty of people who are spiritual and not religious. And they too, 2/3 of people who say I'm spiritual but not religious also experience a personal God. We are built to be in a sustained relationship with God, however we know that and whatever we call that. And the deeper we strengthen that relationship to God, we start to realize that the people who show up in our lives are really trail angels, that we show up for one another as really messengers of God. We're all part of one beautiful big story, a symphony. And once we really get that, then we realize that life is like a sustained prayer. Everything's sacred. Foremost, parenting. There's nothing we do as sacred as parenting, except maybe help those who suffer outside our family. Yeah.
You mentioned that at 19, you went through your own kind of existential crisis. And, you know, that age, because I think about it now, my kids are 10 and 9 and 5, but very quickly they'll get into their 16, 17, 18. And I remember also going through a lot of questions and doubts and breaking certain beliefs in me. What is happening at that stage that causes this chaos within?
When I was 19, and this happens to everyone in some way, there's some type of trigger. And, you know, in my case, the true love of my life broke up with me, and I'd never had heartbreak before, but it could be there's a parent divorce or I fail out of school. There's some trigger, right? And it sets us thinking and wondering, wait a minute. So, you know, to tell my story, I was 19, and for the first time in my whole life, I truly fell in love. I mean, he was perfect, Valeria. Like, he looked like I'd always envisioned. He looked like a Greek sculpture in the museum. He was funny. He thought I was interesting. It was perfect. And after 3 months, we'll call him Jason, give him his privacy. After 3 months, he said, I love you. And I'm like, you love me? No one's ever loved. It was my first true love. And then after 5 months, he broke up with me. And I was devastated. And I thought, I'm never going to love again. Like, there's no one else I've loved like this. I'm never going to love again. What if I never love again? And I thought, well, wait a minute. He said he loved me. You said you loved me. And he said, I did. And you don't now? And he's like, not anymore. He was just being honest. And I thought, well, my mom loves me and she still loves me.
What happened in the process there?
Exactly. And it set me wondering about, is love permanent? Is love real? And are we permanent, or do we kind of flake out and change? Can we count on people? And it really set me into a big existential, as you said so beautifully, a tailspin. That questioning devolved into, wait a minute, does life have meaning? What's the purpose of life? And all my life I felt close to God. Is God real? You know, and everything felt very dark and very empty. And it was chilly. I mean, it was really a cold place to be. And there was nothing in the ruminating of my head. You know, why do I exist? And is love real? Why doesn't he love me anymore? And what am I going to do with my life if there's no meaning? This process of finding the way is a process we all go through, finding the way, no matter how it gets kicked off. When life doesn't square with what we wanted, when we lose what I call achieving awareness, the ability to control our lives, we suddenly realize that, wait a minute, you know, actually, we don't have radical control. We are not narrowly makers of our path. But actually, in these moments, we have an opportunity to say, well, but what is life showing me now? And opening my heart, maybe dust off a rusty prayer or go to nature and suddenly feel, wait a minute, I just know in my heart, in my intuition, maybe a mystical knowing that, yeah, God is real. Life does have meaning. And there's nothing you can tell me or not tell me in school that will ever disabuse me of the deeper wisdom that there is a loving God in and through all nature, all life, one another, and we're built to know it. We have to rediscover that on our own. Now, 25 years later, I've published hundreds of peer review articles, and I can tell you, yes, through our lab and fellow labs around the world, it is clearly the case that with late adolescence and emerging adulthood, we see through longitudinal twin studies, there is a surge, there's a hardwired surge, a hunger of the heart for love and connection and the numinous, the sacred, and there's a nagging of the head. What is my meaning? Now, I don't mean, am I going to become an artist or a lawyer? I mean, my meaning as a soul on earth. Hunger of the heart, nagging of the head leads us to a quest. A quest. We don't need to know all the answers in life, but we can firmly plant our feet in the awareness that life is a quest. That's the end point. And then we're set for life. But that work needs the support of parents. We need to say, yes, I remember when I was 19, and yes, it hurts, and it really hurts. And it'll come back at midlife, and it'll come back in elderhood, and it'll come back when life kicks us. But there is a deep stance of quest where we say, what is God asking of me now? What is the universe revealing to me now? I didn't get the life I wanted, but maybe it's better and better for me. Can we do a practice?
Yes, always.
I'd love to do a practice with you, Valeria. Okay. I'm going to invite you to take 5 breaths, if you'd like, and clear out your inner space. Okay. Mm-hmm. I invite you in your inner chamber with your eyes closed to set before you a table. This is your table. And to your table, you may invite anyone, living or deceased, who truly has your best interest in mind. Anyone living or deceased who truly has your best interest in mind. And with them all sitting there, ask them if they love you. And now you may invite your higher self, the part of you that is so much more than anything you may have done or not done, anything you have or don't have, your true, eternal higher self. And ask you if you love you. And now finally, you may invite your higher power, whatever word is yours, however you know your higher power, and ask if they love you. And now with all of those people sitting there, right now, what do they need to tell you now? What do they need to share? What do you need to know?
Do I need to say it out loud?
If you'd be open to
that. Yeah, they'll all say the same thing, which is the trust in myself, which is interesting.
Valeria, I want to, if you're open, get to know you spiritually. Where are you coming from in your heart? Where are you spiritually in your journey or path?
You know, the findings that I learned through your book, especially the aspect of the genetic kind of code on spirituality, the fact that it comes from the mother, I spent probably 2 weeks thinking about it, just going back to my childhood, trying to remember how my mother went about the world and, you know, her struggles. And I've never really sat down and thought about it. And it was such a beautiful realization that I was always surrounded by very high spiritual connection, because my mother just always welcomed it and always talked about it. There was always a bigger plan. There was always a higher kind of protection over everything. And I never really realized, because for me, you know, I connected spirituality to religion, and did we practice religion at home, and how did it look like? But after reading this book, I've realized that she gave me the biggest gift of all, of just, to your point, walking the walk, but also talking the walk, right? She shared, even if it was just unorganized and sporadically in different times of life, she was just always very vocal about the fact that there's just like a higher and bigger meaning to everything. So I think that very much carried me through life, and also made me very conscious of not using terms like depression or anxiety lightly, because that's something that I do notice, that we using it lightly today. And it just made me really look at challenges and experiences in my life as this kind of opportunity to expand and learn more and move forward. So that is the biggest gift my mother gave me. And I couldn't pinpoint it before. So I thank you very much for bringing this to my awareness. But I would say that's where I'm at.
That's beautiful. That's so beautiful. I had tears in my eyes as you were sharing that. Your mother opened up the window to her soul and her way of being, coming and going, right? Yeah. It's a part of life. And now you have that.
Yeah, I do have that. And I want to make sure that I am as open about it with my kids as she was with me. Because for her, it was very, there was no thought behind it. It was just kind of automatically. I feel like nowadays we live with we think about a lot of things, we overanalyze. So I think that's one of those kind of blocks I need to release and just very much openly share how I move in the world with my kids.
Your natural spiritual heart. This is the existential struggle. And it comes back in life every time we hit an impasse. We can't solve our own problems. Life, there's a flow from the inside to the outside. When it's time to grow, suddenly there's an impasse before me.
That is for sure.
And that impasse often is the exact thing I feared. I lost my money. He broke up with me. Whatever that impasse is. It is put there, I think, by Command Central to help us awaken. So when there's a time where, suddenly I might feel that my life isn't enough, that I'm not successful enough, that I don't have enough, that somehow everything felt fine yesterday and today it feels empty and hollow and not enough. The not enoughness is the hunger of our soul, body, mind, and soul, to expand into a bigger way of being in the world. It's not to necessarily be bigger and better on the outside. It's to expand our spiritual heart and feel the presence of God or the beauty of the universe or the love that we bring one another, and to be a fountain of that, to emerge even more as the spiritual being, the naturally awakened being that we're actually built to be. So these tough times are like, wake up, knock at the door, okay, you don't think your marriage is enough? Could you radically love him a little bit more? Okay, your kids are annoying you. Can you imagine if they weren't here? Okay, you have half the money you wanted. What if you had none of it? Right? So it's a wake up. And hey, wait a minute. What about that guy over there? Look how he's suffering. What could you do for him? So the mom who annoys you in the class, could you love her so much that she actually feels she belongs? The kid with low EQ, could you tell your daughter to go sit next to him and help him along? Be a trail angel. We can bring our spiritual eye. We can use our awakened brain to look at every bit of life and just rewrite that same moment with an awakened brain.
That's so beautiful. Do you feel like now, I'm happy you have your institute. There is very much spirituality-led psychology. Do you feel it changing also across practitioners in the field?
It is changing. So we started academic journals. We started Spirituality in Clinical Practice as an American Psychological Association journal. Our lab and fellow labs have now published thousands of peer-reviewed scientific articles that show beyond the shadow of a doubt, Valeria, we are naturally spiritual beings, just like you and your mother and your children. We are all naturally spiritual beings. And when we honor that and as parents give voice to that, then we flourish. We totally see every single thing in life, same classroom, same house, same friends, with an awakened heart. We love people more. We figure out, okay, this person's really annoying. How can I love them up? Okay, I didn't do well. How can I take this moment to find my true spiritual path? Can we do another practice?
Yes.
Oh, good.
Oh, my God. I love that you're coming with practices.
Beautiful. Okay, Valeria, I invite you again to close your eyes, take 5 breaths. I invite you to locate a moment in your life. Think of a time. Just go back and find a time where you wanted something so badly. It could have been him or her or them to say yes. It could have been that school or that job, that internship you wanted so badly, so you did everything right. A plus B plus C. You researched it strategically. That red door was yours. And you know it was yours because A plus B plus C, you'd done everything right. You go to your red door, you grab the handle, but the handle's stuck. And you can't believe it's stuck because you did everything right. A plus B plus C. You might kick the door. You might be in shock. How could I not have my red door? But only because it is stuck. We have no choice. We shift 40, 80, 150 degrees and over there. Over there is a wide open, sparkling yellow door. On the other side of the yellow door is someone who's more right for us, who makes us feel alive in a way we've never felt before. Is a different school, a different job, where a mentor sees us beyond what we knew in ourselves, where we find our calling, our path. We end up in a city, a community where we finally feel at home. That yellow door was not what we had wanted. It was better and more right and more fulfilling and better for us. And as you sit back now and you see the stuck red door and the hairpin turn leading to the wide open yellow door, was there anyone at that hairpin turn? It could have been a dear friend who for the first time told you a story. It could be a grandparent sharing. It could be a counselor or a guidance person in your life, a chaplain, someone who tells you something pointing to the wide open yellow door. A trail angel. A trail angel giving you information, a story to the yellow door. And now sitting back, stuck red door, hairpin turn, trail angel, and wide open yellow door. How in the road of life are the most important parts of our lives formed? Is it narrowly through strategy and control and tactics? Of course, we need to try and plan. But are we really just only makers of our path? Or are we more profoundly, really on an adventure, discoverers of our journey? And finally now, last stuck red door, hairpin turn, trail angel, and wide open yellow door. In your road of life, where is your higher power? Where is the universe? Where is God? Where is your relationship with God, the higher power? Is God in the open yellow door and the stuck red door? Is God in the trail angel and your ability to be open in dialogue with the sacred presence, with God in us, through us, and around us? Is our life a lived relationship with our higher power? Have you been on a spiritual path all along? And when you're ready, I invite you back.
You know, it reminds me how in the beginning of every year, I do, like most of my friends would do the vision boards, or we're doing the intentions for the year. And this year, I wanted, and it's very visual. This year, I decided that I don't want to put any specific visuals or any specific words, because manifestation is very big now, and everyone's doing it. And the whole purpose of being very specific on what you want. But I've realized that maybe when I'm too specific with what I want, I miss on all these other things that are meant for me. Right. And this has kind of reminded me of the exercise we just did.
Valerie, you are so spiritual and alive, and I resonate so deeply. Manifestation locks ourselves into something very small. The idea that we would specifically manifest something is based only on everything from our past. But if we're open to the guidance of the universe, if we're open to what God calls us to be and become, it is an infinite adventure. It is not what we wanted. It is far more magnificent. It is far more glorious. And yes, it's based on information that is in front of us. When we're in dialogue with God, when we're on our sacred spiritual path, manifestation is far too small from us. Manifestation is the red door. Our relationship to God opens the yellow door.
I couldn't put it into words, but this is exactly, like, it felt right. And it's so beautiful that you could put it in words that I can explain it now, because I couldn't figure it out. I'm like, I don't know if I'm just rebelling for the sake of it, of just not doing manifestation right, or there's a bigger purpose here. And it really is a bigger purpose. And I think that's what I found so magical about this book. It was kind of a validation for me that this quest that I'm on is it's just it is what it is. It's just it's a quest, right? And it's this unknown, and it's wonderful, and there's highs and lows, and I love the unknown. I've learned to love the unknown, and that's so exciting for me about life in general.
That's a sacred adventure.
Yes, sacred adventure.
And I will share with you that being with you and seeing your work, there's a freedom in you. There is a real infinite sense of possibility. So,
thank you.
Valeria, you live and walk a spiritual life. Your kids will see that. Your kids do see that. The idea that, life is not ideal because I got what I wanted. That doesn't make my life ideal. Life is ideal when I'm living in this sustained prayer, the spiritual path. And just as trail angels show up for us, we have the opportunity to be a trail angel. And when you speak with your open spiritual heart, you are a trail angel. You're a trail angel for your children. You're a trail angel here now for your community. Speaking with an open spiritual heart. Moving us past this narrow, it's almost like, a shopping cart in Amazon is manifestation. I want that and I'll go get it.
Yeah.
That's very small. That's based on our lives today, everything going backwards. It's only based on historical information, where we've been, what we thought we wanted, what others told us we wanted. But the spiritual path, our awakened awareness that you live and walk, takes us on a journey, an expedition, where we don't know what's ahead, but it is so far more. It is so much more expansive and loving and glorious and sacred than we might ever imagine, because the guidance of the universe, God's guidance, has information that we have yet to discover. And then when we do get farther down the road, we're like, wow, God, thank you for this yellow door. I'm so glad I didn't stay over there hitting my head against the red door. The good news is that the universe, the spirit, God, is so great and glorious that even if I miss the yellow door, down the road, there may very well be another.
Yeah.
It comes back.
A lot of trust and surrender at the same time.
Beautiful.
We mentioned how 29% is genetic, the spirituality that kind of is in us, and 71 is environment. 71% is environment. Tell me, how can we build that environment around us?
Yes.
If we grew up in a childhood that didn't necessarily foster spirituality.
So as parents and as women, the most important thing we can do is speak with love from our own spiritual heart. So I'm not saying, hey, join my religion, mine's better than yours. It's not about that. It's about speaking honestly from the spiritual heart and connecting at that level and inviting one another to do the same. So if my friend comes to me, if I'm a mom and it's pick up or drop off, and someone comes to me and they just look sad and they look awful and they tell me that their parent died, my own authentic spiritual heart says, I know your mother walks with you. My own spiritual heart says, I feel that great pain. I know that your mother's here now. If it's an authentic feeling, I can feel her. I can see her in some sort of numinous way. I know in my heart that she's watching your children. To speak honestly, but just to say, I'm so sorry, when there's so much more we have to share, is to deprive that moment of its profound sacred significance.
But how do we connect to that? As the messenger of these messages, how do we, because we in society, we're not built that way to be so raw and open and share this kind of insight.
But we have it.
We have it. But how do we, it's like a muscle, right? Like how do we exercise it enough to be able to let it exercise itself automatically?
Beautiful. So the first thing we can do is honor that we do have this deep, natural, intuitive spiritual awareness, that is real data. That is hard data, important data. We need to know that that is real. The second thing we can do is use our voice and say, I like you so much, I want to give you the best thing I have. So we're honoring the importance of our spiritual heart. And I want to tell you that the best thing I have is my intuitive spiritual knowing. Use our awakened language with one another, share that. I think we can also do things to cultivate this together. We have, as moms, for instance, there's a time where, 4 of us or 6 of us will go for coffee. And those can be moments where we really speak in a more profound, loving, and generous way. It is generous to speak from the spiritual heart and say, would you all want to have just today, now for an hour, really a spiritual moms group where we talk about the experience of being a mom from the spiritual heart? And I've done this, and moms love it. And we all have this in us, and we can say, I believed in nothing. And then my son was born and I knew God existed. Or, I really wish my mom were here to see my daughter grow up, but I know she's watching her. Or we can say, you know what? I admire you so much, and I love the way that you're patient. We can honor each other and speak about God in whatever word is ours. Because we are natural spiritual beings, we know of what each other speak, even when we are free to speak in our own languages. Some people talk about the universe, and some people talk about Hashem or God or Jesus or Allah. Everyone use your own word, because this is great American pluralism. We love people of different races. We love people of different genders and orientation. We love all diversity, and we love spiritual diversity. I want to know you in your own voice. And I know of what you speak, whether it's Diwali or Ramadan or Hanukkah or Christmas, I know of what you speak, because there's one spiritual heart. Going there will cement these motherhood friendships the rest of our lives. Some of the closest friends we make as mothers raising our children together. If we take that to a spiritual level, we'll be 90.
Yeah.
And still close.
I think for women, you have these points where your soul is craving that very loudly, different points throughout your life. I know that I craved it when I was building my identity, when I was 19, in my early 20s. I was just like, I need that village to help me feel comfortable in this chaos, or relate, or feel like I'm not alone. Then it happened when I became a mother. I was craving that village to reassure me that, what I'm doing is good enough. And I had the same thing happen to me when we moved to Miami a couple of years ago, where I've realized that I'm craving like a woman's circle that will just help me celebrate my womanhood and my femininity. And, we go through so many different stages in life as women. And to me now, it's like a non-negotiable. It's like a must have for my spiritual life as well, because to your point, is an opportunity to honor each other, which doesn't happen, naturally in society. We have it in us, but we don't exercise that necessarily very openly.
We operate at 1/4 capacity.
Yes, exactly.
And then, as you're describing, we open our spiritual heart and we are at 100%. There's nothing more I have to give once I open my spiritual heart. I've given you everything, because that is the deepest love, the deepest guidance. And we're actually built, Valeria, the same part of our brain that allows us to be in relationship to God, allows us to feel God's presence in our love and relationship for one another. The women's group is actually a sacred group, and it goes through time. And you're so beautifully wise in sharing that motherhood is a hardwired time of spiritual awakening. Just as we come of age in late adolescence and emerging adulthood and want to know meaning and purpose, in an ultimate sense, motherhood is a hardwired time of spiritual awakening. We have just become conduits of creation. Our child is spirit incarnate through us, and we know that. We know that any spirit could have been our child. So you know what? That woman's kid over there, that could have been my kid. We know that God makes families, not people. Sure, we're carriers, but we don't push the button on which baby's conceived or when. In our own path, we prayed and prayed and prayed for years to have children. And the infertility turned out not to be located in our bodies, but it was part of our spiritual path to awaken and grow into the mantle of motherhood.
That's beautiful. Would you call midlife crisis as another spiritual awakening moment?
Hardwired body, mind, and soul. Midlife is a spiritual awakening, which means as we grow spiritually, it can feel like a half empty glass of spirituality. What is my purpose? Have I lived my purpose? Am I walking the walk of my spiritual values? Am I as close to the sacred presence, my higher power, God, as I want to be? Am I living in a sustained relationship with God? These are midlife questions. When we call it in our culture midlife crisis, oftentimes it doesn't carry what you're offering here, which is the spiritual dimension to crossing the bridge at midlife. So emerging adulthood, motherhood, midlife, crossing the bridge to elderhood. And then anytime there's a hailstorm that either hurts or there's loss or we don't get what we want, these are cracks in the illusion of control that say, you know what? You wanted that red door. You'd planned your whole life around that red door. And God is telling you hairpin turn. And I promise you, you are loved and held and guided. You are built to know that. And I welcome you into that awareness. Awaken.
This is so beautiful. Dr. Lisa, thank you so, so much for opening yourself up, for sharing it with the world. I have to be honest, when I picked up this book, I thought, well, here's another book. They'll be filled with all these scientific findings, and that's great. But I truly went through like a journey, a spiritual journey. It made me think, it made me question, it made me honor. And I really, really appreciate your work and for you being here and sharing it with us.
I'm so moved that you loved The Awakened Brain. Thank you for sharing The Awakened Brain. But most of all, you are awakened. You sparkle. And I'm thrilled to share this sacred spiritual moment with you.
Thank you very much. And Dr. Lisa, where can our listeners find out more about your work?
Thank you. Please join me on Instagram. It's Dr.Lisa Miller, Dr.Lisa Miller. And I love to share. I just did a talk with the U.S. Surgeon General that spirituality, spiritual health needs to be central to whole person health. Every single one of us, for a whole person to be thriving and flourishing, needs a strong spiritual core.
I love it. I'm excited for the future. You're making me excited for the future.
I'm excited for how you parent and for how you speak and how you support your listeners in their own awakening, their own spiritual journey. Thank you for sharing The Awakened Brain.
Thank you. Thank you so much for watching this episode. I hope you enjoyed it. Don't miss my newest episode right here. And if you're listening to the podcast on Apple or Spotify, please go and leave a review with your biggest takeaway. I love reading your thoughts. And if you have any suggestions for guests or topics, you can leave them in the comment section. And always, always remember, you are not alone.